back to ChompCast.
As always, I'm Jordan Ricco.
I'm Grace Peters.
I'm Adam Krasner.
And I'm Rafe Khan.
And we cannot wait for you all to watch this episode with this very exciting guest.
Our guest today, Amy Sweezey, is an award-winning meteorologist who spent nearly 2 decades on Orlando's West 2 News, where she became a trusted voice for Central Florida viewers during hurricanes, severe storms, and everyday forecasts. A Michigan native, Amy began her career in the Midwest forecasting snowstorms before moving south, where she weathered the historical 2004 hurricane season, among many others. Beyond broadcasting, Amy is a children's book author, speaker, and founder of Social Weather LLC, where she blends meteorology and media expertise to help others tell their impactful stories. Amy, welcome to ChompCast.
So thank you so much for being here with us today. We're so excited to get to talk to you and learn a little bit more about your experience, your career, your life. So let's just dive right in. Let's start with your journey from growing up in Michigan to forecasting blizzards in Kalamazoo and then covering hurricanes in Florida. What experiences from those early chapters shaped your approach to weather storytelling?
Great question. Way to start off strong there. It's so hard to just pinpoint one thing, right? Because I've been doing this for so many years. And so there's so many things when I look back on the last 30 years of my career, so many different people, so many different experiences that have played into where I am now. I think when I look back on my early days, like when I'm in college and when I'm first graduating from college and getting my feet wet in my career, I think about things like rejection, persistence, not necessarily forecasting abilities, but more just like life lessons. Some of those cliches that say, that which does not kill you makes you stronger. Some of those quotes. It's like the things you go through that now looking back, at the time, I thought, I'm never going to get a job. I got so much rejection, so many bosses that told me, we're not going to hire you. You look too young. You sound too young. You're never going to make it on television. You need to work behind the scenes. You need to, completely do a different sort of career besides journalism. You take too long to write a story. You're a terrible writer. Just so many negatives that are poured into you in those early days. And I don't know, looking back now, I can't really say what it was that kept me from being just sort of, pushed down and believe all of that. But instead, I really did. I just, in the back of my brain, I'll never forget this one time a friend of mine said to me, well, what if you never get a job in TV? Because this was the time where I had already graduated from college. Right. I was looking for a job, sending out resumes, getting rejected, everybody telling me no. And my friend was like, hey, what are you going to do if you don't ever get that job in TV? And I was sort of taken aback and I was like, well, what do you mean? Of course I'm going to get the job. Even though I had been told no for 2 years, I still thought, you know what? Of course I'm going to get the job. I'm going to keep pursuing this and being persistent until I finally get a yes. And I did. And that's what it took. So I just kept hearing those rejections until finally I found a TV station that would hire me for that first job. And then from there, of course, I just continued to move forward and get more jobs, and kind of the rest is history, as they say.
Certainly. I feel like another cliche that kind of goes hand in hand with this is everything happens for a reason. That's something I live by. All those failed exams and little rejections, I know they're on a much smaller scale here in college, but they always hurt in the moment. But looking back, it's always those moments that lead me to apply for that other position or to study harder for the next exam and, get a research opportunity, things of that nature. So I definitely resonate with everything that you're saying on a little bit of a different academic scale. I do have a follow-up question. Did you always know that you wanted to go into TV? At what point did you realize that this was your calling, and what steps did you take to tangibly make that happen?
It took me a while to get there. It really did. When I first went to college, I went to college twice because I sort of reinvented myself right after I graduated the first time. My first stint in college was to be a journalist. I wanted to write for a newspaper. And it wasn't until my senior year in college that I visited a TV station as part of a class, a journalism class. And I was like, oh, this is kind of fun. Maybe I'd like to pursue television news instead. So when I first graduated, I started looking for jobs in news, but I was applying for TV jobs, newspaper jobs, any kind kind of news job I could get.
Right.
And it wasn't until I actually started working in news finally that I realized I had made a huge mistake. I absolutely hated it. I did not want to do this for a career. And then I was like, okay, now what am I going to do?
Right.
So I ended up in a roundabout sort of way. I ended up going back to college a second time to pursue meteorology. I had started working with a TV station. My first job that I got as a news reporter was in South Bend, Indiana.
Wow.
And while I was there, I started training with a meteorologist, the chief meteorologist, and he made the weather so much fun. And he's like, you should think about doing this instead of news. Weather's always changing. It's never the same boring thing. It's 80-20 men versus women. It's 80% men, only 20% women.
Wow.
And he's like, there's a lot of female news reporters, but there's not as many female meteorologists. So you should really do this. And if you do, you should go back to school. And I knew at that time that, especially being a woman, that I didn't want to be called a weather girl for the rest of my life. So I knew that, okay, if I am going to pursue this and change gears and focus on a science-based career and do meteorology, I knew that I needed to go back to school in order to have that background and that training, because I feel like it is oftentimes more difficult for women than men in a lot of fields, but especially in a science field.
One theme that I've taken so far is it's so easy to be discouraged and look at those as obstacles. Look at it, be like, okay, well, I'm a woman in a male dominated field, or I don't have the schooling for that, or I don't have this or that. And it's very easy for that to pile up in front of you. And then you're like, I'm not going to even start. But it's because you stayed persistent and you didn't get discouraged that you had the chance to be able to pursue something that you now love and are really changing the space. And so I think that that's extremely special. And I think it speaks to a bigger point for sure.
I also liked your mention of like mentorship, it sounds like, in that story. Mentorship has been huge for my journey here in college through involvement and leadership and positions that I never would have seen myself reaching for and eventually obtaining. So I think that concept of having someone that points you in a direction and sees something in you that you didn't necessarily see in yourself is also so beautiful and so important to cherish.
Absolutely. And I, not only that mentorship, but all through my career, my internships in the early days, I always had people who came up beside me and gave me advice and helped me for free. Took me under their wing. And so I always tried to do the same thing myself, was to give back. I always tried to have interns. I always would let, people come in and job shadow, even if it wasn't an official internship, meet for coffee, just anything to, sort of give back, because I do think that mentorship and the people that helped me from the beginning, that was really important. And I understand the importance of that now as well.
And I did want to say, so you went back to school and did your studied meteorology. What was that like? And then what was it actually like leaving that and then starting your first day as a meteorologist? Like what happened with that?
Yeah. So in those days, these are the olden days, guys, in the 90s, when, Google barely existed. In fact, for part of the time, it didn't even exist. We barely had email. I was still using an old typewriter, for my papers at school and my first jobs. So when I wanted to go to meteorology school, there weren't very many programs in the US, first of all, and there weren't very many that you could do what we called then correspondence, which now you would say online, like an online class didn't exist. Wow. So the best I had was a correspondence program, which was through Mississippi State University. So I'm living and working in Michigan at this point.
Okay.
And I applied to this meteorology program through Mississippi State, and they would actually mail a videotape, like an old VCR, VHS tape. This was pre-CDs and pre-Blu-rays and pre-streaming. They would put that tape in the mail with stamps on it and send it to my house. I would pop it in my, VCR and watch the professor on the tape doing the lecture. And I would be taking my notes, and then I would mail my notes in the mail back to the university for them to grade it. And that's how we did our tests and our quizzes and everything. It took a long time.
Wow.
It was all, back and forth, because I couldn't just upload my paper to Google or, all the things, all the modern conveniences, the technology we have today. It was definitely a different time.
Wow.
For sure. Especially too, I think post-COVID, like now it's just everything can be virtual. I feel like there's so much innovation in that side. And we've had like people who were speaking about tech, and we've had tech industry leaders on the podcast, and they always tell us like technology is just moving at such a rapid pace. So it's crazy that like even in your time, like it's just changed so drastically. And I think for the better in a lot of ways with education, because now it's more accessible to a lot more people with those programs. And I think that that's very important.
Certainly.
Absolutely. I know the students who take that Mississippi State program now that do it remote, they have chat rooms and groups and they can talk to each other and the homework and the teachers. And yeah, I felt very isolated when I was in that program. So it was definitely it made it more challenging, I would say, to make it through school that second time.
Definitely. One of the things you've mentioned that really resonated with me was that you said you didn't want to be known as just a weather girl. And I think that meteorology can have a lot of misconceptions about it. So can you touch a little on all of the things that go into your job, your position, and what it means to be a meteorologist?
Gosh, great question. Yes. And I think, 9 times out of 10, when somebody calls me a weather girl, they're not really trying to be rude. Most of the time, they just don't know any better, or they're from an older generation. I mean, my dad still calls me a weather girl to this day, and I'm in my 50s.
It's endearing.
So I think there is a lot of misconception. I think I just try to tell people that, hey, just because I'm a female and just because I do like, for instance, you would never hear of a weather boy, right?
Right.
So why is there a weather girl?
Mm-hmm.
You would never call a female doctor a doctor girl. She's just a doctor. You would never call an astronaut a space girl. She's just an astronaut. So I just want to be a meteorologist, not a female meteorologist even. But if you are going to differentiate, then yes, I am a female meteorologist, a broadcast meteorologist, not a weather girl. And I forgot how the rest of your question there about just the weather girl part.
It was really just like diving into what it means to be a meteorologist and all of the different like things you monitor and how you keep track of this field.
There's a running joke that, I would love to be a meteorologist because then I could get paid to lie. There's a lot of people who think that we just throw darts at a dartboard and we make it up as we go along. And part of that comes from the misunderstanding of the science. Part of it comes from people just not knowing what we do. Some of it now comes from social media, where there's all kinds of who we call meteorologists, LOL, that are online, that are putting out forecasts, and they're just TikTok influencers, and they have no meteorology background, but they throw out these scary maps and talk about how a hurricane is coming to this place or that place. And then the real meteorologists have to spend all their time trying to explain that away and why that's not really true. So it's definitely a different landscape now. One of my favorite stories to tell to share is if you were to take a rock, when you skip rocks, if you took a rock and you threw it into a pond and you saw the ripples kind of go out from the pond, if you had to forecast what time that little ripple would make it to the other side of the pond, how would you do that? Well, it's similar to forecasting the weather, because weather is a fluid in the atmosphere. And when one little thing happens in the atmosphere, like an area of low pressure forms, or the sun shines, or the wind blows, it changes and it kind of causes these ripples in the fluid of the atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
So you throw the rock in and you're trying to forecast this. But now, if I have to gauge what time that is going to hit the other side, I need to know, how big is that rock?
Right.
How much does it weigh?
Certainly.
Where do you throw it? Do you throw it close to the shore, or do you throw it farther in? I need to know things like, is the wind blowing and which direction? So that is going to mess with the water and the waves. Does somebody jump into the pond, or are there fish swimming, or are there, what's going on at the bottom of the pond? Is there grass there? Is there seaweed there? Are there lily pads? There's all these other things that I have to know and explain and figure out before I can actually come up with that forecast. And it's very similar with the way the atmosphere works, with all the different factors and things that are going on. It's extremely complicated. It's not an exact science, but I really do think that we have come a long way just in my 30 years compared to the way, the information that we had, the technology that we had 30 years ago with trying to forecast.
Wow.
Definitely.
Yeah, and so I mean, you've had such a successful career. Like you've had over, I think, 30 years in this career and in this industry, and you actually hold the certified broadcast meteorologist designation from the American Meteorological Society.
It's hard
Um,
to say.
right? Meteorological. There we go. It's one of the highest distinctions in your field. What did earning that mean for you, and how did it change your career?
Yes, I have that and also the television seal of approval from the National Weather Association. And so both of those were very important to me. Again, I think because being a woman, especially, that going back to school, sure, that could have been enough. But for me, I just felt like it was important to have the extra seals, the extra, things next to my name to prove to myself and also to other people that I knew what I was talking about. There are a lot of people who think it doesn't matter. It's no big deal. You don't really need that stuff. But for me, it was important. There's some pretty lofty criteria to earning both of those designations with schooling and with test taking. And then you also have to keep up and do like continuing education credits in order to keep those seals active. So I attend conferences and I take classes and I continue to read and learn and network. And, there's a lot of other ways that we keep those designations. So yes, it was very important to me personally. I know a lot of other people don't put a lot of weight in that, but for me, it was very important to me.
Those designations, I think, are absolutely incredible. And that concept of continued learning, I think, is the reason that they are. My dad's a doctor, and he has a similar experience where he has to go to conferences and continue to retake exams and stuff after a 20-plus-year career. So I think just having those opportunities to continue to see what's new and fresh in the industries and, make those connections and talk to people and collaborate, all those things really add to keeping the field present and futuristic at the end of the day. So I think that's really incredible.
Yes. And one of the conferences I went to just recently for the National Weather Association, we had quite a few meteorology students who were presenting. And it was fascinating because, all of us old people could listen to what's new. What are you learning? What are the new technologies? What are the new models? What are the new things that we're looking at with AI and moving forward? And so I love that these organizations also bring us together with different age groups. And different walks of life and people from all over the country and really all over the world. We all come together with this, one love of weather that's our common bond. And then from there, we can just continue to learn from each other.
Generational perspectives are so insightful, in my opinion. I had an internship this past summer, and I was learning from, of course, people that have been in the industry for years and decades even. And I was taking in all this rich information, but also I found in turn that they were asking me just as many questions about AI, for example, technology, how to use new efficient processes that they'd really never had the opportunity to experiment with before, but it's what we're learning how to do in an academic basis every single day. So I definitely think that picking each other's brains and working together and eliminating groupthink on single projects is really, really incredible. And it's great that we're the world is starting to realize that and leverage it at the end of the day. So
absolutely.
Really, so.
Yeah, so I want to talk about some like highlight moments of your career, some of like the craziest, I guess, weather times in the world. I know that, for example, in Florida, where we are, the 2004 hurricane season was unforgettable. And I know that, we looked into kind of how you had covered that and you lived it as both a meteorologist and also a soon-to-be mom at the time. Looking back, what lessons did that season leave you with, both personally and professionally? And how do you handle those high impact, high stakes moments when it comes to your career? How are you able to kind of stay calm and stable during those times?
Well, it's trial and error. It's a lot of practice. Yes, 2004, when I first moved to Florida from Michigan for the weather job, so many of my friends in Michigan were like, why are you moving to Florida? The weather's so boring there. Nothing ever happens. It's just sunny and 70 and, afternoon storms. And little did I know before I moved here that was not the case. We have very distinct seasons. They may not be the same kind of seasons that they have up north, but we have very distinct seasons. We have severe weather. We have hurricanes. We have freezing temperatures and even, yes, a little snow in the wintertime, sometimes once in a while. But yes, 2004 was a rude awakening for me. I'd only been here 2 years, and suddenly we had 4 hurricanes, Charlie, Francis, Ivan, Jean, all make landfall in the state of Florida. I was 8, then 9 months pregnant during that 6 weeks period. And my oldest daughter was born as the last hurricane, Jean, was making landfall in Central Florida. So it was a stressful time. I never ended up having to spend the night at the TV station during that season.
Yeah.
But since then, I certainly did. There were plenty of times where you would come to work and bring your sleeping bag and your air mattress and your pajamas and, not know if you were going to be able to get home or if you'd have to stay there for a couple days. So there were times I stayed at the station overnight. Very stressful. I think the biggest thing when you mentioned, how do you stay calm in all the stress of it? I think a lot of it was, for me, it was because I was living here at the same time. It's different when you're forecasting for a place where you're not living. Like if you work for the Weather Channel or, CNN or, a weather where you're forecasting all around the world and you're not actually there. But when I was forecasting for my family.
Right.
My neighbors, my kids' friends at school, my own kids who were at home. And so, I kept thinking, my friends and family are watching this. I don't want to freak them out. I don't want them to panic. I don't want them to be worried, but I also want them to have the truth. Right. I'm not going to hype it up and pretend like we're all going to die and it's going to be this whole dire thing. I'm going to tell you what I truly believe. Right. And I always tried to stick to that. It's not always easy in the TV world with what we're surrounded with and, some of the expectations from bosses and viewers and social media. But that was always my goal of, I want to keep my friends and family safe. So what is it that they need to know? And that sort of helped kind of rein me in and keep me, I think, more calm when things were really happening outside.
Yeah. Literally calm in the storm. So.
Yes.
And so what's the environment like in the studio at work during these times? I know you said you've had experiences where you were prepared, staying the night. All of you guys are there kind of working together to provide the news in a time of high tension for the community. So what really goes into that process?
Well, most TV stations have a plan, whether they're in a hurricane market or a tornado market, they have a plan going into severe weather. So, and it's, written down. We had pages and pages of a document that was our station hurricane plan. So ours was that we were 12 on, 12 off, 12 hours on TV, 12 hours off TV. And we would go into that mode when the storm started ramping up. Now, this was for the meteorologists. Sometimes the news anchors were also on this plan as well. But when I say 12 on, that doesn't mean I show up at work. So for instance, if my shift was 2 a.m. to 2 p.m., I didn't show up at work at 2 a.m. That meant I had to go on TV ready to talk at 2 a.m. Right. So I probably had to get to work at maybe 12:30 or 1 o'clock. So that means I'm waking up the night before at 10 p.m. or 11 p.m. so I can get ready, get my hair done, get my makeup done, get dressed, drive to work in possibly rain and wind, get there, and then be kind of work with the team that's already been on for the last 12 hours, sort of, okay, what's changed in the last 12 hours? What graphics need to be made? What needs to be updated? You kind of get all that together. And then it's time to go on TV at 2 a.m. Wow. You continue to stay on TV for the 12 hours until 2 p.m. But then toward the end of your shift, same thing. The next crew is coming in because they've been sleeping. So now they're coming in and you're helping them with graphics. So by the time you actually get out of the station, if you can get home, it's maybe 3 p.m. or 3:30 p.m. And now you get home and you're trying to eat. You may or may not have power at your house. You may or may not be able to get home. So it all just kind of depends. But there's always a lot more to it than most people know and think. During Hurricane Irma, which was in 2017, that was one of the storms where I had to sleep at the station. And I went to bed at, I don't even know what time. It was in the evening because I had gotten off work around 2 or 3. And so I went to an edit bay, somebody's office where my stuff was set up. Everybody kind of had their own little separate rooms where they had their air mattresses. And so I'm in there. I finally fall asleep. I'm asleep for maybe 2 hours and somebody comes pounding on the door and opening the door. And I'm like, what? And they're like, you need to leave this room right now. There's a tornado overhead. We can hear it ripping off the stuff off the building outside.
What?
So I'm like, oh my gosh. So I had to wake up and get up, I move. And yeah, the tornado was hitting our building, and it did a bunch of damage and everything. So I was fine. But now after all of this adrenaline, after like a 2-hour nap, I'm awake. I'm like, okay. So I just went and got dressed again and went back on TV and just kept going until Irma finally went away and left us alone. But
Wow.
sometimes it was stressful like that. Other times it wasn't.
That's so cool. I feel like the volatility of the job and the different things that you see and how one tiny thing can completely affect the entire outcome is so interesting. I bet that makes for a really interesting lifestyle. So with that, a little bit of a transition into your roles themselves. As we know, you've been at West 2 News for nearly 18 years, and you transitioned into new roles such as author, speaker, and media consultant. Can you share what inspired those pivots and kind of what was going through your head as you initiated those changes?
It was kind of a slow process. I knew I worked at WESH, the NBC station in Orlando, yes, for 18 years, and I left in 2020. And that was a really hard decision because I had been there a long time. That was my home. It was my family. I loved it there, but I was working the morning show. And when you work morning TV, you wake up at 2 a.m. I woke up every day, Monday through Friday at 2 a.m. And so I had to go to bed early in the evening. And, when my son was playing basketball, I either missed his games or I was up until 9 or 10 o'clock at night. And then I would get 3 or 4 hours of sleep.
Wow.
And it just became something I couldn't sustain personally anymore. And I also knew as a woman in TV news, if you look around, there's lots of 60-year-old men who anchor the news. There's not a lot of 60-year-old women who anchor the news.
Yes.
There's a lot of 60-year-old meteorologists who are men. There are not a lot of 60-year-old meteorologists who are women.
Mm-hmm.
So I had seen a lot of women get pushed out of the TV business over my time in TV. So I always kind of thought in the back of my mind, I need to have a plan B.
Mm-hmm.
I need to be ready in case they do decide I'm too old and they don't want me here anymore. So that's kind of always in the back of your brain when you work in this industry. Any kind of on-camera work, sadly, because it reflects society and society's views on gray hair and wrinkles and ageism. But that wasn't really necessarily why I left when I did. I just thought that maybe someday. So I guess it was a several things that played into it. But the biggest thing was the schedule and my opportunity to do something else and to pick my own schedule, to have the freedom and flexibility to be at my kids' events at night and, go on vacation when I wanted to go on vacation and not be able to go during hurricane season, not be able to go during this time of year or that time of year, or there's too many people off, or, there's all these reasons in TV that you're not allowed to take time off or take a vacation.
Mm-hmm.
And so for all of those reasons, I decided, okay, I need to do something else.
Yeah.
So it was a tough decision. I had already written my children's books before I left my full-time job. That was something that came out of my school visits. For years, I've spoken to 3rd through 5th graders, especially, but really any age group. But 3rd through 5th seems to be the elementary age that studies weather. So they would often bring a TV meteorologist into the classroom to share how we do our job. And so my weather books, my children's books, really came out of that experience. And I wanted the kids to have something else after I left so they'd have, more of me to take home and be able to read the books. So that was kind of a side project. I love it. I still do school visits now. I still, do book signings and I love reading my books around the area. But from there, I also just started doing other media work. Mm-hmm. I had to ask myself, what kinds of things, what kinds of training did I have? What kind of skills have I built that translate to a different job or a different field? So now I really have like 10 different clients that I work for. I started my own company, a media business. And so, yes, I do some speaking. I speak about the weather, but I also do like motivational and inspirational type speaking. I do hurricane workshops. Mm-hmm. I work for a company where it's called Convention News Television, CNTV, where they go around and really kind of do the news at a convention. Mm. So I'll interview people about, why are you here at this convention? What product are you here to sell? Or what's new with you? And so I get to still kind of hone my media skills. My most exciting project, though, is a year ago, I had done a TEDx talk called Reinvention at Any Age. And I talked about how I reinvented myself when I went from news to weather straight out of college. And then I reinvented myself again after I graduated or after I left my full time job and had to be like, okay, now what do I do? Not a TV meteorologist anymore. So now what can I do? So now that I've done those reinventions, I have started a podcast that is also called Reinvention at Any Age. And it is where I interview people who have reinvented themselves. Mm-hmm. So it's been a really fun project. And I think I've learned so much from all of these people so far that I've interviewed about what they've done. And they've given me some great advice. And I think the listeners to the podcast are getting a lot of great advice as well.
Incredible.
Diving into your children's books a little more, what was kind of the reaction that you saw when they went to market, and how did you see the impact of teaching the younger generation in such a new kind of mode about weather and about your field?
I've always loved speaking to children who are interested in weather. They have so many great questions. They're so excited about it. I've always just, loved the opportunity that maybe I could inspire somebody else, a child who wants to be a meteorologist someday. But my first book is a fiction story, and the title is It Never Ever Snows in Florida. Wow. And of course, I know that is not true. It does actually snow in Florida, but that was the big reaction I got when I first, even now when I post pictures of the cover of my book and people are like, "Nuh-uh, you're wrong. It snowed in 1978 and 19 blah, blah, blah." I know. That's what the book is all about.
Trust me, that's my field.
Exactly. But the reason I wrote that book is because my kids, when they were young, we sent them to a school where it was half school, half homeschool. And the homeschool part that we would do, we would read stories and we would talk about the seasons when they were in like kindergarten and first grade and all the different seasons. And we'd get to winter and talk about snow and blizzards and cold and ice. And my kids were like, what? They didn't get it because they were all born in Florida. So they didn't really understand what these winter books were about. And so when I started looking for more books about Florida winter weather, I discovered there really weren't that many for kids.
Wow.
So that was how I was like, okay, I'm going to write a kid's book about Florida winter weather. And that's how I came with this. It's a little boy named AJ. And my son, by the way, his initials are AJ. Oh. So it's a little boy named AJ who was born in Florida. He's never seen snow. And so he's bummed and he's like, it never ever snows in Florida. Right. So that's the title of the book. But it's a fun story because his mom is a TV meteorologist and his mom teaches him about the weather, and he has two sisters, which of course I have two daughters. So
I'm seeing a little inspiration.
Exactly. It's based loosely on my life. And yet, at the end of the story, little AJ does find out, because his mom takes him to the library to read about all the times it has snow in Florida. He finds out that he's wrong and that sometimes it actually does snow in Florida. My nonfiction book is Let's Talk Weather, TV Forecasting Behind the Scenes. And it's basically just my school talk, the visit that I do with kids. It just talks about cold fronts and warm fronts and how the weather works, how I come up with my forecast when I'm on TV, how I decide what the temperature is going to be, or if it's going to be sunny or cloudy. So that was a labor of love. And right now I am working on a book for adults. It's a lot of the things that we're talking about today. It's little snippets and stories from my life, and then kind of trying to use those as like life lessons, some of the things that I've learned from doing TV weather for 30 years, and then the ways that I could apply some of those lessons to my life.
That's awesome. And you also, I know you briefly touched about it, but you founded Social Weather. And so how do you kind of combine the science communication and media expertise? And what does your day-to-day look like running your own company?
Oh gosh. So I started my company when I first wrote my books. So that was the original plan, was I'm just going to have an attorney had told me, hey, if you're going to have this little book business on the side, you need to have an LLC, you need to create a business. Right. So I did that thinking that's all it would be. And then as I started thinking about leaving my full-time job, I was like, maybe this is what, my full-time job needs to be. So I just started adding some umbrellas underneath my social weather business. So it is some weather. I still freelance doing meteorology and forecasting. I freelance for the Spectrum News 13 station here in Orlando, which is wonderful. The team is fantastic, and I only help when they need me, when they need extra help. I'm not there every day waking up at 2 a.m. I just
Right.
go in once in a while, a couple days a month. It's great. I also forecast for some stations around the country. There's been some stations that if they need extra help and they're in a pinch and a bind and they need somebody last minute, or they need somebody because someone's on maternity leave or someone has left and there's a hurricane coming, they'll call me and I'll go in and just fill in at the station for a week or 3 or 4 days or whatever. So I am still doing a lot of weather meteorology work. I freelance for Carnival Cruise Line.
Oh,
They are one of my clients. Now, I don't forecast for Carnival, but I am a weather contributor. So I do weather related stories. So, for instance, if a hurricane is impacting an itinerary and the ship is supposed to go to Turks and Caicos, but there's a hurricane coming, so they've decided to go to Bimini instead, I will create videos and they air them on the ships.
wow.
So that's
That's
kind
so
of a fun side thing, too.
Yeah, so interesting.
That's so awesome.
Looking ahead, what do you see changing in the role of meteorologists, and how do you see that evolving as climate change makes the weather more extreme and unpredictable?
Yeah, I mean, weather is going to be unpredictable no matter how smart we get and how technologically advanced we get. That's one of the things I say when I go to my school visits. I tell the students, hey, even if you live to be 100 years old, even if you're as smart as Albert Einstein or whoever the smartest person is that you can think of, even if computers get to be even more technologically advanced and even more AI, you're still not going to be able to find a weather forecaster who can get the forecast 100% right 100% of the time.
Right.
Like that just can't be done because the weather is unpredictable. Now, we are way more accurate now than we were 20 years ago or 30 years ago. We have a lot more information. There's so much more that goes into the forecast, but there's still that element where, consistency matters, persistence matters, longevity matters. Me living in Central Florida for 30 years, well, no, actually 25, I guess now, not 30. But for as long as I have, I've learned things about the patterns. And, when people say, oh, I've never seen this, I've never seen 2 hurricanes like this next to each other in the Atlantic. I have like 6 times. You know what I mean? Because I've been around long enough and I have. And the people saying this are probably people in their 20s who really haven't ever seen that before.
Right.
And that's cool. But it's just, it kind of puts things into perspective too. So I think all of those kinds of things are really important when it comes to forecasting. But as we move into the future and as we move forward, I think we're going to see less and less TV meteorology and more digital meteorology. I mean, even now, if I asked all of you guys and took a poll, I'm going to guess most of you don't watch the TV news. You probably get your news from TikTok or Instagram or scrolling through even just online from Google.
Mm-hmm.
People don't watch the news like they used to. And so I think it's the same thing with weather. So I think we'll just start to see more and more actual meteorologists, hopefully, taking over social media and the internet and the digital world so that people will still have a trusted source,
Certainly.
but they'll be able to find it more easily.
I mean, admittedly, I will say I do see a lot of headlines and things from TikTok and Instagram. I'll just be scrolling through and I'll see something. I mean, it's instantaneous oftentimes what that stuff gets put on those platforms. And then I'll often take it to Google and see if it's actually real. And I will say 50% of the time it's not, but that is the first thing that catches my eyes. So with that, as a professional, how do you think that professionals in your space that have that long experience and the education background and all this wonderful information to share, how do you approach this digital landscape? Do you think that going on a platform like TikTok it will maintain your credibility? And if so, like how do you show listeners that you are a credible source?
Yeah, I don't think it's the platform that gives you credibility or not credibility. I think credible people can be on TikTok. I think it's just that it's people are more drawn to it who aren't credible. But But I've always been a firm believer in the credibility just comes from me doing the best I can do every day.
Right.
I never tried to hype up storms. I never tried to downplay storms. If I thought it was going to be serious, I would say that.
Mhm.
I never felt the need to put other meteorologists down.
Right.
There are a lot of people who are like, don't listen to this person, don't listen to that person. They're, and they spend all this time, hey, come listen to me. I don't hype it up. I don't do this. And it's me. And I just felt like I don't need to do any of that. People are going to figure it out on their own.
Right.
If they watch me for a while and realize that, oh, wait, she's actually telling me the truth. And oh, wait, she actually admits it when she doesn't really know what's going to happen with this storm.
Mhm.
Instead of these other people over here who are crying wolf or who are, whatever, hyping things up or just trying to clickbait. So many of those accounts that are fake or are maybe real people that aren't real meteorologists, they're getting paid every time you click like, every time you share their post, every time you watch their video. Cha-ching. They have their accounts monetized and they are making money off of that.
Mhm.
And so I am so frustrated when I see a post on Facebook and it's got, 5,000 shares
Mhm.
and it's something that's not even true. And it's so frustrating. But at the same time, I can't fight that.
Of course. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the only thing I can do is build my own following and build my own credibility and keep my brand to be someone who can be trusted and who's not going to, call people names online or, I want people to know that I have integrity and that I'm going to do the best I can do. That doesn't mean I'm always right. It doesn't mean that I don't get things wrong, but I just want people to see who I am. And then I just focus on that.
I love the notion of storytelling with science and numbers and data. I'm an information systems major, so that's kind of what I've leaned into over the past few years is taking things that have been seen as black and white and using them and to tell people a story and give them advice and allow them to plan their days and things of that nature. So I really resonate with that, and I think it's such a cool concept once you understand and get to grasp it.
And
Yeah.
in TV, the weather story that's key. It's not about spitting out a bunch of numbers, especially nowadays that somebody can get on their weather app. They don't need me to tell them what the humidity is because they just push a button and they can see what the humidity is.
Right.
What they need is for me to tell the weather story, to say, okay, what is the big story? Like, this is the big thing that we're focused on. Now, here's why, and here's what that means for your forecast.
Certainly.
And I remember, speaking of stories, several years ago, I had a boss in Florida. And every morning, the meteorologist on duty would have to go into the morning news meeting. And that's where they were deciding their stories for the day. All the reporters were getting their assignments and, you're going to go here, you're going to go there, you're working with this person, blah, blah, blah. And then everybody goes out and does their stories for the news. The meteorologist would always come into that meeting to give a weather update. And so that everybody was on the same page and knew what was going to happen that day. And I'll never forget, I walked in the meeting one time and I said, well, things are pretty quiet today, not much happening. And the boss looked at me and said, well, then what do we need you for?
Wow.
And he was being kind of sarcastic and, nasty, but he had a really good point.
Yeah.
Because it's like, you're right. And from then on, that was what I needed to be like, you know what? I'm not going to say, well, rinse and repeat, more afternoon storms today, 95 again, same old thing. Like, you have to find that one little thing. Okay, what's the one difference about today compared to yesterday? The storms are going to set up at the coast today instead of inland.
Mhm.
So that's my whole story. That's my focus.
Wow.
Or, the humidity is going to be just a little bit lower and make it feel a bit more comfortable after sunset so you can have dinner outside. And now that becomes, instead of just the same old, like everybody knows, the summer weather in Florida, it's the same every day. But it's my job to find what's the story, what's that one thing that's different today than was yesterday. And that was always my goal.
Incredible.
Yeah.
And talking about finding the story and storytelling as a whole, 10 years from now, what do you hope people will say about your story, about your impact on meteorology, science communication, but also would you say about your journey? Like, what do you hope 10 years from now that you're like, I'm happy that I reinvented myself with this and that this happened and I can just take, pride in the fact that I did this. Like, what is some of those highlights of your life that you're excited to build upon in the next 10 years and look back on?
Wow, that's a good one. So many things pop in my brain. I think I hope that I'm authentic I hope that people see not someone who's fake or not someone who lies to them about the weather. Um, I hope they see the resilience, because I do think all the mistakes that were made early on. Boy, I'm so glad that YouTube didn't exist when I was coming up in TV, because it's tough nowadays when everything's on recording. Um, I made a lot of mistakes in those early days. People were forgiving and helpful. I had so many mentors. These are just sort of like my thoughts that are coming out with thinking about my past and things that I hope people see. And I don't even know if people do see that stuff unless they hear about it. I think it's just that that's what goes into making you who you are today. So people may not know, oh, she was super resilient. Oh, it took her 2 years of rejection after college to finally get her first job. A lot of people don't know that, but I hope that when they see me today, I hope that they know that I've worked hard to get where I am. I've put in the work. I didn't just have a dream, but I actually put in the work and went back to college and, did the work to make that dream come true. I think that's my goal as I move into the future. Like you said, the next 10 years, 10 years from now, wow, who knows what the world will be with AI and technology and, the advancements that we have. I'm here for the ride. I'm here to take it one day at a time. I love now that I don't have to have it planned out. So many things have come my way, like the Carnival cruise opportunity. I didn't know that was a thing.
Right.
And suddenly somebody reached out to me and said, hey, this is a thing. Would you be interested? Because they knew I was freelancing. They knew I was, a meteorologist. And those kinds of things, I hope, continue kind of coming down the road. There's that saying about being lucky, but you're not really lucky. It's that you put the work in, or I forget what that saying is. You guys can look that up later. But something about if you put in the hard work, then you are lucky, but it's not really luck that you've actually had to work hard to get where you are.
For sure. I think too, I kind of have like a variation of that in my own life. Like, I feel like there's been so many rooms and people that I've gotten the chance to meet. And I was telling my mom, I'm like, I'm just so lucky, like, at the opportunity to meet these people. And she's like, well, you got yourself into the room.
Certainly.
You opened the door for yourself to be able to get there to meet those people. So don't discount the hard work that you also put in. And then life does, she's like, your hard work does pay off. And that is meeting someone that is going to help your career in this way, or meeting a mentor, or meeting a friend, and so it's very special. And I think that is a beautiful way to be remembered as authentic and to continue living your life as that and as your truest self. And I think that that's just so important as well.
And also remember that you do a lot of work to get that foot in the door, and then you meet the people, but it doesn't stop there. You have to keep working. It took me forever to get that first job, and I finally did because I knew someone. I had interned with a guy at CNN in Chicago years before. He was a reporter at the TV station. He's the one who reached out and said, hey, we have an opening. So it was who I knew, not what I knew, that got me the job. But then once I got the job, then I had to do the work to keep it.
Well, I think that is a perfect note for us to end on. Amy, your journey from Midwest snowstorms to Florida hurricanes and now to author, entrepreneur, and mentor is truly so inspiring. I know, at least I speak for us, and I'm sure all of our listeners. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us today on ChompCast. And from the ChompCast team to all of our listeners, whether you're a student curious about science, a parent teaching kids about weather, or just someone who appreciates a great story, Amy's journey is a reminder that passion and persistence really can weather any storm. So thank you again for being here. We are so thankful for your time, and we can't wait to watch all the amazing things you're going to continue to do.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate this opportunity. Love, my Florida schools. I'm a Florida transplant, but I still love my Florida schools.
Incredible.
And I appreciate your time, and kudos to all of you. You guys are doing a great job. I think this is a true testament to where you're going to be in life 5 to 10 years from now. So congratulations to all of you.
I appreciate it. And for our listeners that want to stay on the podcast wave, where can they go listen to one of your episodes?
Oh, thank you. Yes. My podcast is Reinvention at Any Age with Amy Sweezey. And I am on YouTube. You have to go to my actual YouTube channel, Amy Sweezey, and then just find the playlist. that has all the podcasts in it if you want to watch it. But the audio pods are on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart, Amazon Audible, pretty much anywhere that you listen to a podcast, you'll find it. So Reinvention at Any Age with Amy Sweezey.
There we go. If you guys are just as inspired as we are, go over, get more inspired.
Podcast supporting podcasts.
Yeah, we're all podcast family over here. So we, of course, had to shout that out. But thank you again. It's so wonderful to meet you and get the chance to speak with you and hear your story.